Let's talk about Gymnastics Ireland. For this week's video, I had prepared a fun, light-hearted video on Black History Month, which is this month, and why we're named GORM for those who don't speak Irish. But unfortunately, that video will have to come at a later time because I felt it very important that we talk about this issue of today. So for those who don't know, my name is Mamobo Ogoro. I am a social psychologist, and through GORM, I make weekly videos on how we can unify across differences. If you haven't been on the internet over the past week, Ireland has been on the international stage for the wrong reasons. What happened was a video in March 2022 of a children's gymnastic tournament went absolutely viral online. What had happened was a young black girl was proudly standing in line up to receive her medal amongst her white peers. Each white child received her medal, but she was totally ignored. We purposely chose not to reshare the video on our platform as to not further amplify what I feel would be outrage politics online. But yes, I've watched it. And through the incident, what you can see is the confusion, the shock, and then utter disappointment in this little girl. While I watched it, I honestly felt like I was thrown back into my 11-year-old self. As someone who grew up in a black household and identifies as Afro-Irish, it actually quite frankly feels like you're visible, so visible, yet invisible at the same time. My nickname growing up was Jaga Jaga, which in Nigerian Pidgin English means all over the place, chaotic. And because of incidents like this growing up, I actually shut down that spirit. And it's only quite recently in my late 20s where I'm actually finding that Jaga Jaga spirit again. So the level of empathy that I feel for this little girl is quite honestly on a personal level. And I chose not to speak about it outright because honestly, I felt like I was adding hot air into an already stressful and traumatic situation for this girl and her family without adding any tangible solutions. So my heart was honestly broken. And I just didn't know I didn't want to react on a visceral level without actually thinking things through. So I can honestly deeply and utterly empathize with this little girl because this moment and the attention that it's getting is not just going to be fixed in her memory, but it can actually be attached to her self-esteem and how she's developing as a young adult and as a person in today's world. But getting back to the incident, the fact that it took global gymnastic icon Simone Biles to bring attention to this case before any meaningful official response to the family is something I'm not actually surprised by. Too often, issues of diversity and inclusion are often an afterthought or an add-on for organizations. And it often takes an external push or a PR crisis in the case of Gymnastics Ireland to get a response or meaningful action. It really raises the question about the willingness of organizations to confront systemic racism and equality beyond their own reputation. To add injury to insult, the incident was initially dismissed as a mere mix-up of medals and then a non-apology further compounds the problem that people see today. Dismissive statements such as "there's no place for racism here" really makes me question the genuineness of taking accountability and only adds a plaster on a deeply rooted issue such as racism, discrimination, and equality. And as someone who is in the diversity and inclusion space, the reality of viral content, in this case, and with many others, arising from the traumatic experiences of Black and brown people, causes not just people, but organizations to move and engage with topics of diversity and inclusion is quite disappointing. And it really begs the question why our focus is only on these issues when content goes completely viral online. Will we still be engaging with this in 3 months' time? I hope so. In a recent article in The Guardian by author Emma Dabiri, she said, "Racist incidents are symptoms of something far more all-encompassing, reacting only as though the perpetrator is a wicked anomaly rather than an indicative of a social conditioning that has informed the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of far more people than we may care to admit, distracts us from the strategic solutions." One thing that was quite frustrating to see when looking at the online outrage of the video was the blame on the individual perpetrator and the fixation on her single action and behavior. While many of us were horrified by this person's actions, and yes, she should take accountability of them, let's not forget that focusing on a single racist incident or a situation does not remove us from the wider systems of inequality that perpetuates such behavior. Too often do we see incidents online, we get outraged, we post things on our social media, and then we forget it. That is quite frustrating on my part. If we really want to eradicate such instances ever happening again, we should focus on long-term strategic solutions for tackling inequality and discrimination. How? Firstly, we must stop minimizing the existence of racism. Whether it may be racism that is outright and blatant, like incidents that we see here, or casual racism. By the way, I hate the term casual racism. Racism is racism, full stop. We need to confront the conditioning that perpetuates such behavior and invest in education to enhance understanding. Training, if conducted meaningful with the right kind of expertise, can be a first step in the right direction. And side note, just because someone is Black doesn't mean that they're equipped to facilitate all-encompassing anti-racism or intercultural education. Please look at people's credentials. We need to advocate for structural changes within institutions. And if you are in a position of power within your organization or institution, this is a prime opportunity for you to dig deep in your organizational policies, practices, and action plans when it comes to discrimination. And if you need help regarding this, ask for it. And lastly, we need to challenge the narratives and behaviors that play out in our environments. The narratives that further harm and traumatize Black and Brown communities. Often, this is the narratives that often go viral online. We need to create spaces where such communities are not trauma porn, but also highlight their voices in a nuanced and holistic way. And at GORM, this is why we do what we do. For underrepresented voices and communities to own their narrative and use their voice. And yes, we're a small social enterprise, but our goal is to provide a space where we can see people of alternative backgrounds and perspectives and where we can unify across our differences. So it's time for us to actually challenge the narrative, confront racism at its front, and actually change the systems that actually play out in our society today.